So we'll start with Kenny. Maybe you can give us what we know about the status.
You bet. Thanks, Brandy, and good to see you all. I have to admit, when I got up this morning to come in for the launch, I didn't anticipate seeing any of you. So, but still good to see you all. Yeah, it wasn't quite the day that we planned, but it is great to have Nick and Alexi at least here back on the ground again. Anytime you can get a crew safely home, you feel very good about what you've accomplished that particular day. The fact this crew didn't get to orbit, we feel bad for them, but we have every confidence that our Russian colleagues will figure out what's going on, and we'll hopefully see Nick and Alexei on orbit and at the space station again soon. As most of you know, the plan was to launch at 3:40 a.m. Houston time this morning. About 2 minutes into launch, there was an off-nominal signature with the actual Soyuz, and the second stage booster had an issue at that point. Per the standard procedure, an abort was initiated, and the crew descent module was removed from the stack, and at that point it entered what you call a ballistic landing trajectory, and about 34 minutes after that abort was declared, the crew touched down safely in Kazakhstan, a short ways from Zhezkazgan, the city where we stage out of when we go to nominally return to cruise after a nominal landing. So anyway, it was great to see the crew and get them back to their families. I would like to extend a special thanks to the Russian search and rescue teams. I've actually been over there and been on operations with those teams when they've recovered crews before, and they are very professional. They know exactly what they're doing. They know how to approach their job. In this particular scenario, there were paratroopers involved. There were search and rescue teams in ATVs, followed up by helicopters worth of search and rescue teams. So anyway, it's quite an operation, and these teams do it very, very well. And again, another testament to that today with the recovery of this crew. So a special thanks out to those folks. As far as where we go from here, our Russian colleagues typically, when they have a failure like this, they will stand up what's called a commission, and we expect that to be formed very soon. Which will be tasked with trying to understand exactly what happened and what recovery efforts are needed in order to get flying again. So we'll expect to hear some details on that over the next few days from our Russian colleagues. They've already offered to us that whatever they learned, they will most certainly share with us. And our experience to date is that when they have these kinds of issues, they will give us an understanding of what their best understanding of the failure is, and so we look forward to working with them on that. As far as where we stand on orbit with the International Space Station, Serena and Alex and Sergey are doing just fine. There's no issues. They're currently scheduled to be on through the middle of December timeframe. Certainly don't anticipate any problem throughout the rest of their increment on board. That'll give our Russian colleagues certainly the better part of 2 to 3 months to try to diagnose this problem and understand what they need to do to correct that. So again, I think we got runway in front of us, so I don't worry too much about at least the next couple of months from a station standpoint. The one activity that we are taking a hard look at right at this point is our EVA plans. We plan to do a couple of spacewalks over the next 2 weeks, and we'll be looking hard at that since now one of our EVA spacewalkers is still on the ground, and so we'll have to go look at that plan closely and see what makes sense in terms of trying to conduct those spacewalks. And anyway, that's our near-term thinking. And relative to space station, and so we'll certainly keep you up to date as we learn more about the investigation, as well as anything that we might be doing with the on-orbit situation, which again at this point looks very, very stable and actually very good. So with that.
Okay. Thanks so much, Kenny. Reed, maybe you can kind of give us the astronaut's perspective on today's event.
I'd say the first thing that I want to really stress overall is that this is, in my opinion, a good news story. As Kenny mentioned, the crew is already back on the ground in Baikonur. They've been reunited with their families. NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine is there. He's been meeting with the crew. And so certainly from the crew perspective, we're well trained for an abort. We never anticipate one, but we kind of expect one. And our procedures walk us through each phase of the ascent and which abort regime we'll be in. So you're ready at all times for that abort. Today's abort was automatically initiated by the vehicle. So from a crew perspective, certainly there was a bit of shock in there for a moment, but the communication with the crew was extremely professional. They had a brief moment of weightlessness, and then G-forces built up, parachute came out, and they landed in Jezkazgan, which we're actually quite familiar with, as Kenny said, because that's a standard recovery site for our astronauts and cosmonauts when they come back. So overall, it's great to see how the Soyuz handled this emergency, how the crew handled this emergency, and got our cosmonaut and our astronaut back safely.
Right. We saw some great photos there of the crew in Baikonur once they arrived back at the airport there and were greeted by their family and NASA colleagues and officials. So next we're going to take some questions. We'll start with media here in the room. For media who are joining us on phone, you can press 1 to ask the question and then press 2 if your question gets answered and you need to withdraw it. We'll come to the phone bridge after we take a few here in the room. Let's start here with Mark Carreau.
Thank you, Mark Carreau for Aviation Week. And my question's for Kenny Todd. Is it imperative, do you think, that NASA needs to see the results of the investigation before you would go for another Soyuz launch with NASA crew?
I think with regard to the investigation, when you look back at the history of failures on the Russian side, we always work side by side closely with the Russians as they perform their investigation. They give us the insight we need in order to be able to go through our own process here, our own readiness review process that culminates with a flight readiness review. So absolutely, I anticipate we will form our own investigation team, just like we've done for every other major anomaly on the Russian side. That team will be tasked with learning as much as we can about the situation, forming our own opinions, asking our own questions, formulating those, formally delivering them to our Russian colleagues, and getting that data back to put into our own process and our own thinking. So absolutely, the results of that investigation, the answers that we get to our questions are paramount in helping us conduct our own flight readiness review process.
If I might follow, what was going on dynamically with the second stage, as best you know, at this point when the abort event happened?
Mark, anything? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I would just say that watching the ascent from our Contingency Action Center here, first stage appeared nominal. There was first stage booster separation, and then the abort occurred, and that's really all the data that we have at this time.
You do anything more than that, and we would be speculating. And you know, we saw the strap-on boosters come off, and then shortly after that, and within a matter of seconds, is when we heard the abort get declared. So in and around, it was clearly in and around that time frame, but very, very difficult to the untrained eye to be able to try to diagnose what was going on. We really got to leave that to the folks who know that vehicle.
All right, Gina Sinceri.
Gina Sinceri, ABC News. One question for Kenny and Reed. Reed, you've actually launched that, and can you tell us a little bit when we talk about a ballistic entry? What's that like? I mean, describe what was going on for those guys.
So the big thing is you want to get the crew in an abort, you want to get them back in the safest mode possible. And for the Soyuz, a ballistic mode is the safest mode. And all that really means is it's like shooting a bullet out of a rifle barrel. It starts slowly spinning the descent module so that it has aerodynamic stability as it comes back through the thicker parts of the atmosphere, and then the parachute comes out and they land. So the crew would have experienced just a fairly benign amount of rotation, about 6 to 7 times Earth's gravity, which is not insignificant. But from everything that we have seen, the crew's in great shape. They're in Baikonur and they're healthy. All of our folks there have already been talking to them, and they look real good.
And Kenny, Russian media is reporting that they've opened a criminal investigation into this incident. I mean, what does that say to you? Is this just a normal process? We had the issue with the whole up there earlier, and there were suggestions that it was sabotage. I mean, what's going on here?
It's a good question. Unfortunately, I hadn't heard that statement, so I'm really not prepared to comment on where we think it is relative to a criminal investigation. At this point, what I've been told is it's an investigation, and we wouldn't expect anything different if they've taken that in a different direction. It's you know, they know something I don't, or else they're just doing it as part of standard process.
Okay, Eric Berger.
Eric Berger from Ars Technica. Question to follow up, I think, for Kenny. First of all, from your opening statement, it sounded kind of like you had some expectation that the Russians would do this investigation fairly quickly and then return the Soyuz rocket and spacecraft to operation in a fairly short order. Is it your expectation that that will happen before the mid-December timeframe when the crew is supposed to come home, or are you looking at options now to extend their time on orbit?
Well, relative to how the Russians conduct their investigation, that's if that was the implication, I certainly didn't mean it to be. Obviously, this is a high priority from a Russian standpoint to go try to understand what happened with this booster. So certainly, it's my speculation. I think it's fairly accurate that this will be a high priority, and they will put a lot of resources on trying to understand exactly what happened and trying to collect whatever evidence that they can get to see if they can support a conclusion here. And I would anticipate that they would try to do that sooner rather than later. But we'll have to see where the data leads them, and if that's a month, or if it's 2 months or 6. I really can't speculate on that, on the length of it. Relative to the December return, we're going to have to let that play out a little bit. The good news is we've got some runway to allow the Russians to go do some of that initial work to see if they can't get this narrowed down relatively soon. But if not, as a program, we're going to look at what our options are to try to make sure that we don't have to decrew station, and that's an ongoing thing that we always do when it comes to trying to manage the overall flight program, is to ensure that we've got crews on board to do the jobs we need to get done.
And as a follow-up, do you know if is there a Soyuz crewed spacecraft available that could be launched to the station? And is it within the existing safety protocols to have that anonymously docked, which would obviously give the crew on station more time to come home with a sort of a fresh vehicle?
You mean if the current one that they have times out, if you will, if it expires, for lack of a better term?
I think it's like January 4th or something like that is when nominally it expires.
Not that I know of. Again, the vehicle that's going to bring up the replacement crew obviously is moving through its normal development process. How our Russian colleagues would choose to handle that situation in and around December, if we're still trying to figure this out, that's all still TBD. So, but yes, most definitely there's a rocket and a capsule that's getting ready for a crew that's planned to be launched in the time frame in December.
Okay, Alex Stuckey.
Alex Stuckey with the Houston Chronicle. So in terms of Nick Hogg, what happens to him? Will he sort of be recycled? I mean, is he just sort of out of luck for a couple years in terms of going back to the space station, which would really be unfortunate, I think, for him? What's sort of the plan there?
So at this point, we are just beginning to talk about that. Nick is an outstanding astronaut. He was the first member of his class to be assigned to a mission and to fly into space. Without a doubt, we will recycle him. Where that falls in the plan, yet to be determined.
Okay, I think that is all the questions in the room for now, so we will take questions on the phone bridge next. Again, if you have a question on the phone, you can press 1 to ask it, and 2 if your question gets answered. Let's start with Marcia Dunn from Associated Press.
Me?
Go ahead, Marcia.
Great. I'm wondering, how long could the current crew on station stay there? What you're saying that their Soyuz expires January 4th, can that be slipped much, and if so, how much? And what happens if you do have to decrew? If no one's on board, how long could the space station fly with remote control input from the ground?
Sure. The Soyuz does indeed have a lifetime. the typical lifetime that we see a Soyuz, we usually put them somewhere around 200 days is about where we put them. There's a little bit of margin on the other side of that, but not a whole lot of margin. As Eric said, probably early January timeframe, we would start to call it sort of the end of the life of that particular Soyuz. As far as where we see decrewing station, that's something that we're always prepared for in terms of being able to support not having a crew, especially when we're in a 3-crew period. One of the things that where we find ourselves today with 3 crew for at least an extended period is we're going to go back and dust off some of the same products that we had from back when we were in these longer periods of 3 crew, and make sure that we have a good understanding of what the systems tweaks are that'll be needed to ensure that if we did have to decrew for whatever reason, that we could continue to manage the systems on board the station with our ground controllers here in MCC and around the world.
Could I just follow and ask, could you fly the space station indefinitely without a crew? I mean, what's your thoughts?
I feel very confident that we could fly for a significant amount of time. I don't indefinitely could be a very, very long time. So I hope we're not there, because our goal is to get back up there and get on with the science and the research that we need to do. But in terms of the systems are certainly designed, if they can continue to operate and the pumps do their job and all the other systems, the arrays continue to rotate and we can keep the batteries charged. Yeah, there's nothing that says we can't just continue to bore holes in the sky and do a minimal amount of commanding. So yes, I'm not too concerned about that, as long as our systems continue to operate at the level that they're at now. And we have good redundancy in those systems, by the way, a lot of these critical systems. And so, even then, we can tolerate some failures, some significant failures, and continue to operate the station in a decrewed manner.
Okay, next we'll take Mike Wall from Space.com.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I mean, for this is probably actually Reed. Like, what does this make you feel like as somebody has flown space missions? Does this serve as a reminder, basically, that what you guys are doing and what these guys were actually doing on this morning is a very difficult proposition? I mean, we're like 60 years into the space age, and it's still really hard to actually do what we're trying to do, right? I mean, how does it? Can you just give a little perspective on? Yeah, I mean, space flight.
Sure. I think it just reemphasizes that this is a dangerous business. I think it also really solidifies in my mind that the Soyuz is a robust, redundant, reliable machine. It has a lot of flights under its belt. And in this case, where it had an ascent anomaly, it has a great abort system that brought our crew home safely. So it just underscores to me that it's a good system, it's a reliable system. And I remain to have complete confidence in the Russians and the quality of their work.
Okay, next up is James Dean from Florida Today.
Hi, thanks. I just had a few quick questions on sort of the data, I guess, such as best you have it at your fingertips there, of what happened. I think you said it was about 2 minutes the abort occurred. So at what altitude were they at? About how fast were they traveling? Did they technically reach space in the flight, and about how long? What was the length of the abort before they hit the ground?
So the best that we can tell, and this is mainly speculative, so I really just want to not underscore that this is hard data, but about 50 kilometers in altitude when the abort occurred. So that's just below what we call the boundary of space at 100 kilometers. And then I think Kenny reported 34 minutes from the anomaly until they were back on the ground. And that's time for a little bit of weightlessness. That's time for the parachutes to come out and float back down to the ground. Rescue forces were on them absolutely immediately. So that was a great thing to see happen. So that's really all the detailed data that I have. I'm sure we'll come out with a lot more refined data as the days come on.
Okay, now we'll take a question from Lauren Grush with The Verge.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. This may be something you don't have an answer to quite yet, but let's say we moved forward in the future and the ISS does need to be uncrewed, would that have an effect on the commercial crew flights? I mean, does the crew need to be on board for those flights to take place?
Certainly for the early flights, that's one of the requirements. We want to have crew on board because we want to monitoring the fact of the matter is the space station is a $100 billion international asset for the world. So we definitely, when we start talking about these demonstration flights, having a crew on board, being able to monitor these vehicles as they approach, it's certainly a very important thing for the overall, comfort of both programs, both the CCP program as well as the ISS program. So that would very much be our intent, is to ensure that we have crews on board and ready to respond to anything that we might observe as these new vehicles approach, again, especially for these early flights.
Okay, next up is Miriam Corin from The Atlantic.
Hi, yes, thank you for taking my question. So let's say that the investigation checks out and everything's fine and Russia is ready to conduct another launch, slightly similar to the first question. Would you want to wait for an all-Russian or at least a non-American crew to fly first before putting NASA astronauts back on?
I understand your question. That's not the way this particular partnership is put together. I mean, we've been flying on Soyuz rockets for a very long time now, and as I explained to Mark earlier, we have a flight readiness review process that we go through for every launch. Certainly when we have a crewed launch, it goes up to the very highest levels, senior levels of NASA participating, to make sure that we've done all of our own homework and getting comfortable with flying these flights and putting our own astronauts on these flights. So at this point, that I don't see that as an outcome on the backside of the investigation and our own just based on the relationships that we have and the agreements that are in place for flying crews to space station.
And just one more quick one. Do you have any protocols in place for when the International Space Station remains empty? Is there a certain amount of time that the space station can remain unoccupied?
I don't know that we actually have it documented a particular amount of time. Again, we have a decrew type of document, but that's more associated with making sure that we get the systems configured by the time we get ready to leave station, and have it in a situation where we could have autonomous control from the ground. But I don't believe we have a defined time limit. I can do some homework on that, but I don't think it's specifically called out a particular time limit.
Okay, now we'll go to Dan Vergano from BuzzFeed News.
Thanks. Dan Vergano, BuzzFeed News. I was wondering, could you say anything about how long past investigations into these kind of things have taken? Is it a matter of weeks or months? And also, does the U.S. or does NASA have to pay for this launch? Is this something you don't pay until you deliver the astronaut on board the station?
Well, from the standpoint of past sort of issues, it all comes down to the severity of the issue and how quick you can get the data. Sometimes you can get a lot of data. Sometimes you can get the forensics from things that fall to the ground. Other times that data is not available to you. That hardware, if you will, that sometimes can help you hone in on the problem quickly. So it really does run the gamut. So I would hesitate to say that this is going to take 4 months or 6 months or 2 weeks. I would be doing it a disservice if I tried to do that. But I've seen them run the gamut from fairly near term to again taking a little more time. And our Russian colleagues, our experience is that they'll take the time that they need. I believe it'll be a priority for them to ensure that they get all the right resources on it and try to work the problem as quickly as they can. But I don't get the impression that they will do so at risk of missing something.
Thanks. And the payment question?
The payment question, I'm going to defer an answer on because I just don't know exactly how that particular milestone gets paid.
Okay, we'll go next to Keith Cowing with NASAWatch.com.
Hi, two questions for you. One is, the last time we had a stand down, it lasted multiple years, and the Soyuz was there to pick up the slack. This time, however, we don't really have that capability. Two things. You can answer this any way you wish. It's sort of an open-ended one. At some point, people start getting launch fever and start thinking of maybe we can move things up. The commercial crew has already looked at taking the first crew flights and possibly making them operational. Do you have a plaque on the wall that from Columbia and Challenger that sort of, do you have a safety valve in your process that where you catch yourself saying, wait a minute, do we want to do that? Yes. And second of all, in terms of just the amount of time until you can launch something, what is the procedure for asking the crew, hey, can you stay up there longer? And is there a dotted line at which you would not ask the crew to stay any longer? And does that have any basis in, Mir or Salyut or Kelly flights or anything like that?
So I talked to the crew this morning. They're doing great. I flew with one of them, Alexander Gerst, and everybody's in good spirits, and they're ready to serve at the will of the program. So they will stay up there as long as we need them to. For your first question, we think about past accidents every single day at work here, and we have a very thorough flight readiness review that we do. And when we decide that it's time to fly, we'll get on the vehicle and we'll go fly.
And if I could add, I chair the mission management team for the space station program. And in the room that I chaired in, at the very front of the room, we have plaques to both of the crews that we've lost during the space shuttle era. And those are right there. They're very visible for everybody to see. The decisions that we make outside the flight control room are just as important as the ones that get made inside the flight control room in terms of the trades and the risks that we try to balance. And so know that it's a very visual reminder. And then at every chance we get, we try to remind folks to not get go fever. Don't everybody get on the bus to Abilene. We got to continue to challenge each other, and we have to continue to ask ourselves, are we doing the right thing, and is there another option that might involve less risk for us? So that's an ongoing thing. Again, we can never waver in that. And we do have processes here that allow people, if they do get uncomfortable, if they don't like the answer they're being told relative to a challenge, there are dissension paths, and that's okay. And as managers, as leaders, we have to honor that and help to make sure that those opinions get brought forward, and that we have them discussed in an open forum. So absolutely, that is something that we've tried to learn that lesson, and again, try not to sit back on our heels when it comes to this kind of thing.
Okay, next up is Dave Mosher from Business Insider.
Hey, thank you for doing this press conference. I suppose this one is for Kenny. You said that the crew need to be on board for the commercial crew missions to dock. That's part of the requirement. And you have the Soyuz that won't be very fresh after, say, January 2019. So I'm just kind of thinking through the potential impacts therein if Soyuz is not ready by mid-2019, which is when the first missions are supposed to launch. Is that program then sort of attached to whatever happens with Soyuz, or would NASA be willing to make a deviation, kind of speaking to that risk you just dug into there? Thank you.
Well, we're about 8 hours into what was a pretty major anomaly here with this Russian vehicle. I can promise you that we haven't thought too far out in terms of what this might mean to the CCP program. I'm thinking maybe some CCP people might be thinking about it, but for those of us in the space station program, we got to eat this elephant a little bit at a time, and right now, we're in a good position for the next few months here with the Soyuz and the crew that we have on orbit. In parallel with that, our Russian colleagues are going to continue to work the problem. We have every confidence that they'll figure out what's going on, and they'll come back to us with a plan on how to get the Soyuz back online again. And as they do that and they work through that and help us understand what their schedules look like, we'll start to look at some of our downstream schedules, including the commercial crew program and the milestones that they have for flights to the ISS, and we'll make any adjustments that need to be made. But again, 8 hours into this, it's really hard to give you much detail on how that's going to play out.
Okay, and our final question on the phone is from Joel Achenbach with Washington Post.
Yes, thank you so very much. This is super helpful. Can you take us back to the crew in the capsule? Did they have any sense of the anomaly, or was it a complete shock when the abort was automatically initiated? What was it like for them? What was that ejection process like? What did they say at that moment? What did they say during this 34-minute descent? Could you give us maybe just a few more details? Was that obviously that's high G forces? Was it a hard landing? How long did they have to wait for the rescue teams to get there? You said they were on them right away. Was that 1 minute, 10 seconds? Was it 10 minutes? Just give us a few more details also about their movements. Where are they now? Thank you very much.
I'll try to take that in bite-sized pieces. So we know during their ascent, certainly this happened very, very quick. So a little bit of speculation would be in the order of less than a second. They had a booster emergency light illuminate in the Soyuz. We know that light came on, which signaled to them that there was an anomaly with their ascent stage. And then their abort motors fired. So that's very, very quick. I would call it an acute onset of G. Very brief, but very high to get them away from the booster. So now they're in their reentry module. They've been separated from the booster. And then at that point, the crew, the first thing that we heard them report was that they had sensed weightlessness. And that's because they've been removed from the booster now and they're free falling back to Earth. And then the next call that we had from them was that they were feeling fine. And then the ground teams asked them to engage the ballistic reentry mode, which they did. And we are well trained for all of these events when we're coming back in. And so the crew handled their procedures exactly as planned. Because they were a little bit away from the launch site when they came down under parachute, we had a few moments where we did not have communications with them. But then Russian search and rescue forces picked up communication very quickly with them from one of their aircraft. And then the Russian forces, the search and rescue forces, were on the ground when the capsule touched down. So they handled this emergency extremely well, extremely professionally, and they were on the capsule immediately. And they were calling back reports to their mission control and to our mission control that they were in communications with both crew members and that they were feeling well. And then the extraction happened not long after that. I guess there was one more piece that you had asked. What's going on with the crew right now? They are back with their families and with medical professionals in Baikonur, which is where they launched from. They were evacuated back to Baikonur. And they'll spend the night there. And then tomorrow morning, we expect that they'll start making their way back towards Moscow to Star City, where we do our training and where they live, preparing for the flight. But that's speculation at this time.
Okay, I think we have at least one more question here in the room from KPRC.
Thank you so much for taking my question. Roseanne Aragon with KPRC. I just wanted to ask about the significance between the partnership with the U.S. and Russia and how that allows us to get into space. I understand we're grounded for now until they figure this out.
Well, I think, it's the entire international partnership that makes up the International Space Station. There's a number of countries around the world that help make this project happen. Clearly, over the last several years, we have relied on the Russians to help get our astronauts to space. And that partnership has just continued to grow. I think the ability to work through issues, the openness that gets displayed on both sides, really, I won't say it's unparalleled, but certainly we're very proud of the relationship that we here at NASA and with our Roscosmos and Energia friends that we've developed through the years. When it comes to technical issues and things like that, they really don't know a lot of political boundaries. They are what they are, and the ways they solve them are we solve them the same way. And so, they have some great minds over there, and being able to work these problems together, we've made a lot of good things happen.
All right, and a couple of follow-ups. Gina?
For Kenny, how does this affect progress, supply flights as well? And how are you on? I know 3 people don't eat as much as 6, so you've probably got plenty of food up there. But what does this mean for the progress flights? And then one quick one for Reed, too.
Yeah, I'll start in reverse there. And from a consumable standpoint, yes, we're in very good shape. When we got the HTV up there at the end of September, we really packed a lot of consumables on that flight, and so we're really good going forward. And that was assuming we had a crew of 5. So now with a crew of 3, we're going to be just fine. We have reached out to our Russian colleagues already. We have a lot of our senior management that was attending the launch, and they reached out to the senior management on the Russian side, offered whatever help we can with the investigation, but also, we have supply flights coming as well, and if there's anything particular that we could help them with, that's just a normal quid pro quo thing that we do to help make sure that both sides of the station, both segments are maintained in good status. But as far as the progress goes, I think the investigation will have to drive out, where the similarities are. Obviously, this happened relatively early in flight, and so, you could find a situation where they might need to look at the applicability to a progress flight as well.
And Reed, the abort video, watching that, what was going through your mind?
I hope they get down safe. That's the only thing that was going through my mind at that moment in time when I was watching that play out in real time. When I heard the first calls from the crew, there's a huge sigh of relief, but you know that from the time they execute an abort until the time they're on ground is a lot of steps in the process, and all of them went right. And then even getting rescue forces, will they be able to find the capsule when it comes down? Are they going to land in the desert or in a mountainous regime? And in this case today, they were quite close to the launch site. They landed in the desert. It was, for the crew, it was pretty standard kind of landing. So my heart was beating hard when I heard the abort occur. And then from the ground teams, everybody gets right into their checklist. Our training all takes over, and the communication was really quite outstanding, I thought, across the board, considering that we have teams in Moscow, Houston, and then deployed in Kazakhstan, and everyone was communicating exactly the way we're supposed to make this rescue happen expeditiously and get the crew back to Baikonur in good health. So it was really, again, it was just such a good news story in a terrible case to end the day.
Okay, I think Eric?
Eric Berger with Ars Technica. Question for Kenny. So, we always hear about how there are really good relations between the U.S. and Russia, engineer to engineer, astronaut to cosmonaut, and I think that's true. But in late August, after that leak, and after the leader of Roscosmos made some troubling and objectively baseless claims about potential sources of that leak, I know that caused a fair amount of consternation among some people here. I've talked to them. And it seems like that would almost have to affect the trust level going into the second investigation here. You second in a row on a crewed launch vehicle, you're one way to get to space. And so I don't know, can you say anything about that, sort of about kind of your sense of the trust level as sort of you approach this investigation?
Back in that time frame, certainly we thought that the comments were premature in terms of the statements that were made by the Russian side. But once our administrator and Mr. Rogozin got together and compared notes, talked about how we approach this situation, it seemed to be there was a bit of a misunderstanding, and so at least they worked through that problem in August. I can tell you today, Jim Bridenstine is actually at the launch site. Mr. Rogozin is at the launch site, and as I said earlier, he's already had discussions with the administrator about their plan going forward, the fact that they intend to work together with us and share whatever data that they get coming out of their investigation. And so just having those two in the same part of the world and all experiencing this together, again, I think is probably beneficial and hopefully will help with controlling the message as we go forward.
And I would add to that Jim Bridenstine and Dmitry Rogozin, we've actually talked with them and expect to have some video of interviews with them to play later today on NASA TV. Mark?
Thank you, Mark Carreau with Aviation Week, and I have a couple of questions. Was there any indication that the abort was triggered by a loss of propulsion or an explosion?
There's no indication of that at this time. There would be speculation.
And I had a perspective question for Kenny Todd. You guys got a taste of having four crew in the U.S. segment in the last few months. Now you're back to two, and there's a context here. You're trying, the policy folks are trying to move space station operations into a more commercially managed session, and address the interest of the commercial sector in being a part of low Earth orbit research, operations, tech development, and so forth. Is there anything you can sort of say about what this means in the long term with regard to all of that? I mean, I do understand you get commercial crew next year, and you're back with 4 and 7 crew and 4 on the U.S. side, and everything comes back. But you have to accomplish that, and I just wondered how you're thinking about telling the story to the people who are starting to think about having a stake in the commercial side of operations.
Well, certainly, I think this is, as Reed said earlier, this is a very difficult business that we're in, and it can absolutely humble you, and you can't ever lose sight of that. A lot of the commercial folks that are out there that are already on board station or that we have worked with before certainly understand, just watching our flight program as flights move around and they're trying to get stuff to orbit. These kinds of things happen in this business. There are things that happen that you have to account for, things that you didn't expect that all of a sudden, whether you want to or not, you have to account for. And so I think the community at large that's trying to play in low Earth orbit is starting to understand some of these ideas about what it takes. I think today was a good reminder that even on the human side, not just getting your science to orbit, but on the human side as well, and having somebody there's absolutely some risk associated with that, and it has to be managed. And again, you have to have the right perspective when you approach trying to do business in low Earth orbit. So I think it's a good reminder to a lot of that community. I can tell you now that we're stepping back to 2, we're already starting to hear from some of those folks who are doing some work on station and trying to drive some of their own discovery in the commercial world, and they're wanting to try to understand what this means to them. So anyway, I don't see that as a bad thing. I see those are people that are out there really trying to push the envelope here when it comes to working in low Earth orbit, and we'll go work with them. We'll try to figure out a plan B if we need to and move forward. But again, several different perspectives there. One to the folks that are trying to work today and understand, and we're going to go back to 2 crew, but also for the longer term for folks who want to get in this business. You got to have a tough stomach for it. So.
Okay, and I think we have one last question in the back.
Hi, my name is Jeff Ealing. I work at Channel 13 here in Houston. During the descent phase, was the cosmonaut in control of the craft? Was this computer assisted? What was going on as far as getting them from the ascent to the descent? Was that computer aided, or was it the astronauts?
So the entire system is automated. There are some manual steps that the crew can take. In this case, they took one of those manual steps to engage this ballistic reentry mode, which just helped the safety of their return, but it's fully automated, and the parachute's automated, the landing's automated. So in reality, the system is designed to function effectively without crew interaction.
Okay, we will wrap up today's briefing there. Thanks so much for tuning in, and you'll want to stay tuned into NASA TV. We'll have some additional video for you over the course of the day, including some different looks at the launch video, some video of the crew in Baikonur, and interviews with both NASA